I remember, I must have been 10 or 11 years old, after my parents had set up my first savings account at the TD branch of the Park Royal Plaza Bank, going to that bank to make what must have been one of my first deposits, all by myself, and then waiting in a long lineup, and then finally getting to the teller with my brand new green passbook, these little books that they used to run through machines, and then she'd serve me and run it through the machine, take my money, count it, fill out all these forms, and then I'd get my passbook back, and it would, have my deposit on it, but it would always update the interest from the money you had in there before, which I thought was just brilliant, that I was getting free money on top of my money. And I remember in particular how proud and just right, it felt to be a customer. That good sense of being well served by the bank. The tellers were always so professional and astute, and they knew how the banking system worked, and I knew nothing about the banking system and how it worked, and that they helped a kid who knew nothing find his way, I thought was just amazing. And I kind of felt the same way when I was 27 and for the first time met a mortgage specialist who did all of that math magic and that banking goodness so that we could buy our first home. And then last year, when I was trying to figure out the complexities, and these things are complex, these RDSPs, Registered Disability Savings Plan for my son Edward, had a long conversation with someone in Toronto about how to set up one of those for him. Very thankful. Throughout my life as a client, I, for the most part, have experienced gratitude to the presence of financial services in my life. As have, I'm convinced, the many companies and businesses who have used the services of investment bankers over the years in our world. And what do bankers do? This definition comes from a new friend, John Terrill, who's the director of the Center for Integrity in Business at the School of Business and Economics at Seattle Pacific University. And he defines it this way in an article I read this week that I'm leaning on quite heavily for this service as well. It was awesome. I could have read it as my sermon. His definition of investment banking is, in general, investment bankers help clients with capital, issuing stocks and bonds, trading securities, identifying and negotiating corporate mergers and acquisitions, and assisting with myriad other financial advisory services. They're like the circulatory system in a body, facilitating the flow of capital and other assets to entities that need it most and will put it to best use. Kind of like how God, by His Holy Spirit, guides and keeps and brings wisdom to the lives of His people, so that we can have what we need to ultimately flourish in the greatest way. Did I just compare an investment banker to God? Aren't they the antithesis of God? Especially now, right? They're the ones who brought down the economy. They're the ones making all those big bucks and greedily ripping off others. They're crooks, aren't they? Like Rolling Stone wrote about them. Aren't they like a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity, relentlessly jamming its blood funnel into anything that smells like money? Wonder how the Rolling Stone magazine really feels. Probably not the magazine itself, because there's writers there who would feel it. The truth is, investment bankers have been a part of this huge economic calamity that the world has been living through over the past couple of years. Along with you, borrowing like crazy and spending like absolute in insane ways at such low interest rates, treating your house like an ATM, and along with regulators who seem to go totally blind over the last 5 to 10 years, allowing some things like derivatives and CDOs to happen, And along with investors, if you're one of them, who kind of liked getting 11, 12, 13% return year over year on these crazy investments that somehow investment bankers were facilitating. And there have been some huge investment banker type failures as well. But that is not the whole story in terms of what investment banking is. A couple of weeks ago, I met with a friend who runs an office that's filled with investment bankers at a major Canadian bank downtown here in Calgary. And in the course of our conversation, he kind of introduced me to what it was all about. But he said, regarding this stereotype of bankers, quote, "There's no more corruption in this industry than any other." And I know there's 2 or 3 of you that are choking on your bagel on that one. But the former real estate developer in me thought, yeah, I know that. Like, next to big pharma and investment bankers, real estate developers are on the bottom, from the bottom up, the bottom of the barrel, right? Always greedy and ripping people off and wrecking things for potential tenants. And that wasn't true. There was a lot of goodness in that industry, and there is a lot of goodness in this iBanking industry as well. The problem is, with investment banking, the failures are often spread across the front pages of newspapers around the world, and they involve so much money in terms of absolute dollars, often other people's money that's being invested by them, sometimes improperly by them. Whose image is coming to mind? Maybe Bernie Madoff. But the whole system surely cannot be made up of that stereotype that the news brings us. As my friend said, otherwise nobody would ever get caught. The market itself is a check on that kind of greed. Otherwise nothing would work economically in an increasingly globalized world where countries from here are buying companies from here and vice versa. If it was all corrupt, nothing would be working right now, economically. A few bad apples don't spoil the whole bunch, girl. All the older people are laughing at the fact that I just quoted Donny Osmond. Just because sin is present in your life, right? You're messed up like the rest of us. Doesn't mean your whole being is ruined and that you're of no earthly good or godly good. That's bad theology. And to paint the whole of investment banking with one broad stereotypical brush is equally errant. God has brought about a great deal of global flourishing through the presence of the investment banking industry. And capitalism, with all of its warts, has brought more well-being to more people than any other economic system that's ever grown and been alive on the face of this planet. Yes, a whole bunch of people in a whole bunch of places being left behind. Yes, huge greed sometimes at play in that industry, and I would imagine huge temptation for people who work there. But still, overall, weighing all sides, I think, the best system we've ever had. Lord Brian Griffiths, the vice chairman of Goldman Sachs, said in an article this friend of mine had read, quote, "Consider what international banks have done through global capital markets to help China and India develop. It is phenomenal. Hundreds of millions of people have been taken out of dollar-a-day poverty. To me, that is a social good and in part is the result of financial markets." That's true. Equality, balance issues aside, people being left behind aside, very real and important issues, this is still true. And where people in God's world find better food and shelter and health care, God's will is being done. even through all of those investment bankers operating at the upper echelons of the economic circulatory system that supplies money, in this case, to our world. Jesus said that God causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous.